would you do us the honor of reading the roll, please?
Mrs. Blanks?
Here.
Here.
Mr. Levine?
Here.
Mr. Paulou?
Here.
Ms. Poland?
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farson?
Here.
Mr. Zaganowitz?
Here.
Representative Gus Bacon?
Here.
Substitute Student Representative Megan Poland?
Here. Thank you. And a second thank you goes to Megan Poland, who is stepping in for Megan Striff Cave. We have the Megan thing going here, who is unable to join us because she's at States. It's their second round for field hockey. So while we don't usually allow interruptions, if there's any news on the game, feel free to let us know.
You do know who they're playing, correct?
No. Uh-oh.
It's the Conard Hall.
Oh! Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, we're rooting for both sides. So, never mind. Okay. Thank you for telling me. That's right. We are nonpartisan on this board. Absolutely. Thank you. Gus, in honor of your longer service, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There is no revision to the agenda order that I know of. And so we will move directly to our student participation from Duffy School. Do you want to introduce them? Oh, you're going to introduce them?
Christy, everybody I think knows our principal of Duffy is here to talk about Duffy's computer coding group. So Christy Laverty.
Good evening, everyone. I am very pleased to introduce you to Duffy 4th and 5th graders who are members of our new coding club. Come on in, students. All the way up, Liam.
Can our viewing audience see all this? Good.
Members of the board and community members in the audience, Duffy's Coding Club would like to welcome you and introduce you to our new friends. These 6 robots named Ash are a part of the computer science work that we are participating in at Duffy. We are members of the Duffy's Coding Club, a new club established this year and taught by parents Miss Luo and Miss Fischera. Coding Club is a place where you can learn to code and also have fun with it. What I like about Coding Club is that sometimes you have a lesson with a video, or other times you get a challenge. The challenge is work you get to do with a team. Coding is something for kids to learn more about computer science, because not many people get this experience. I think that at some point in life, everything will be technology, so it is an important skill to have.
Coding Club is fun because you get to code on the computer and learn different types of code. Right now we are making art with coding. I'm making a haunted house. We're learning that you could do anything with coding. If you learn how to code, you could do so many other things.
I liked learning all the strategies like loops and trying out Blockly for the first time. I enjoyed completing challenge questions and getting through challenge lessons. I really liked the Halloween project because there was a lot of creativity involved.
Every Wednesday we were able to practice new things. I learned how to draw using code, and I also learned how to code without using the computer. We did coding for making a picture using squares. We also built a tower that could hold a big book using gummies and toothpicks. This task was related to persistence. Sometimes coding could be hard, so persistence is extremely important.
My favorite part was getting to code the robots and doing the art on the Out of Code website. I liked being challenged to try new things. When we were doing the drawing, we had to use a certain angle. This was hard because we had to figure out which angle to put in. If we put in the wrong angle, the artist would move the wrong way.
Our coding club ends this month, so how will we continue our computer science learning? It's easy. For the third year in a row, all Duffy Dragons will participate in Hour of Code in December. Classes will visit our makerspace to explore coding websites and code a variety of robots, Dash, Ozobots, and Bebots. Members of the coding club will be leaders to make this year's Hour of Code the best one yet. We will work with the students in kindergarten through 5th grade to teach them about the importance of coding. We want all Duffy Dragons to know that coding can feel like a superpower. When we get to play with robots, it was my favorite part. I like to see the different colors and patterns. The Ozobots can read the colors and the coding inside the robots, help it to know what to do and say.
Everyone loves Coding Club. They literally have to pry us off of our computers each week. The Ozobots were probably the biggest hit of the coding class. Let's show you now how cool it is.
All right, dragons. You can take those Ozobots back to your spot. All right, close us.
Thank you for letting us join you this evening. We hope that you learned about the importance of computer science. Your hard work has earned you a coding certificate. We would like to present those to each of you now. Thank you again for having us.
Excuse me all, before you leave, if any parents want to take pictures, come on up. It's not sacred ground up here. We'd love to have you.
Right out that door.
If you're leaving, can we have another round of applause as you go? Thank you all. I just do want to remind parents that you are not now obligated to stay for the entire meeting, but you're welcome to if you care to. Okay, thank you so much. I just want to say I had my first hour of coding exactly a year ago, so I'm really impressed. I couldn't do any of this stuff. That's really wonderful. Thank you. We now have public communications, comments on topics of interest from the public. I just want to remind you that the board does not respond to any comments. That there are 3 minutes per individual. After 2 minutes, you get a little card. Do you have that? Yes. Okay. A yellow card, and then after 3 minutes, we cut you off at the knees. There are, it looks like, 8 people all speaking on the same topic. Technically, we're allowed 7, but could we just do 8 since people signed up for 8? I'm asking everybody. Okay, so we'll take all 8 people who are signed up. Just don't tell anybody, I say to the audience. Okay, you can go right up and then speak. You could speak into the mic, you don't have to turn it on. And we'll begin with Mary Beth Cowan. Sorry, I can't read any of this handwriting. Sorry. But just introduce yourself, say your address, and then we'll all be golden.
Yes, I'm Mary Beth Callan Serdechny, 115 Grenard Road. I've spoken to all of you before. I've been involved with the Start School Later group for 2 years. It's actually a core group of parents and professionals who have been passionate about this subject for 13 years. And I've spoken about my own experience. My own son, who graduated from Conard last year, was able to switch his schedule to start at second period versus first period. And it made a world of difference for him and our family. I saw him yesterday, in fact, because I got his absentee ballot, first time voting, and we met him for lunch at his college, and he is now taking 8 o'clock in the morning classes. He's also a lacrosse player, so he often has 6 in the morning workouts, and he's able to do it because even though he has early classes, they don't last all day. College classes only a couple in the morning or a couple in the afternoon. He's able to nap, as many college students do, in between. And I said to him, what would you like me to tell the board about your experience last year, the years before? And he said, tell them it just makes school easier for kids. It's easier when we're awake, we're in a better mood, we're less likely to engage in risky behavior, do better at sports. And he just wanted me to tell you that. Also, now that I don't have children in the school system, I'm still invested. I'm a grad myself. Our children were the 4th generation here in West Hartford, and we're property owners. And these lovely students and our schools are our biggest asset in town and what makes our property values so high. So if we invest millions in upgrading the science labs, freeing our schools of lead-based paint, asbestos, hiring wonderful teachers to be able to do this with our elementary school kids, something I didn't learn until college many moons ago. If we are investing so much but are not utilizing those investments in the proper way, we're not getting the most out of our investment. We need kids to be able to go to school when they are awake, when they are being able to take advantage of our investment. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Julia Dean, I believe. two people, so say both of your names if you don't mind and your addresses.
I'm Julia Dean and 45 Whittleson Avenue.
I'm Serena Vanderhulst, 1179 Farmington Avenue.
Thank you all for taking the time to hear our thoughts and our perspective on later school start times.
My name is Serena Vanderhulst.
My name is Julia Dean, and we are both 7th graders at Sedgwick Middle School. We are both very passionate about the subject of changing school start times, and we want to share our opinion with you. Serena and I believe that the school start times should be changed. Although the current suggested change doesn't exactly benefit us and other middle schoolers, we are willing to give up a few minutes earlier now so that in high school we can get the proper amount of sleep that we need. High schoolers cannot usually fall asleep until at least 11 at night because hormones are getting in the way of melatonin being produced. As a result, they cannot fall asleep until very late at night. I read an article in Health about a month ago about making high school start times later, and I learned a lot of new information, including the fact that high school students who started later are more active and engaged during classes and are able to understand harder topics. They also talked about how the football teams for these schools were not doing very well during the earlier start time, and when the schools changed the start times to later, the teams made it to finals many years in a row. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but I highly doubt it. If our athletics and education will improve in high school from a later school start time, then I believe that we should have a later high school start time.
Teens are most likely to have anxiety and thoughts of self-harm or suicide if they don't get enough sleep. We strongly believe that getting even close to a healthy amount of sleep, which is 8.5 to 9.5 hours per day, is important to our academics and athletics. To get even close to that amount, we need to have our high school start time be pushed to later so that we are able to work hard and focus each day. We have been petitioning for a later high school start time for about 2 days, and we have already collected over 130 signatures, which we have a copy of right here if you want to pass that around. The signatures were both online and in person in support of this idea. The majority of the signatures came from students at Sedgwick Middle School, and we are beginning to communicate with students over at King Philip and Bristow Middle Schools as well. Clearly, this shows that many of the middle school students in our town are in favor of later high school start times, even though this doesn't necessarily benefit us right now. However, we feel that we can more easily make up the extra 10 to 15 minutes of lost sleep time now in middle school rather than losing an extra 45 minutes of sleep each day in high school, which is the time when we will need to work harder than ever before in our academic, sports, and other activities.
We hope that you do vote to approve the change to school start times. And if you do vote yes, we would like to request that you minimize the change for middle schoolers as much as possible so that we can still get a healthy amount of sleep during the 3 years we attend middle school. But most importantly, we definitely support the change to high school from 7:30 to 8:15. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope that you will change the school start times so every student can be successful and well-rested in school.
Thank you very much. Next is Mary Fleishley.
Good evening. I'm Mary Fleishley, and I live at 28 Brunswick Avenue. Laws restricting tobacco use before 18. Warning labels on cigarettes. Raising the drinking age to 21. Seatbelt laws. Bans on texting while driving. Graduated licensing for teen drivers. What do all of these have in common? They are public health issues that were addressed by public policy. These changes were not made because the majority of voters asked for them. In all of these cases, there were people who did not appreciate the change. Change is always inconvenient, but these changes were made because our public servants wanted to help create a safer, healthier world. And now most of us look at these as sensible changes. My dad started smoking at age 10, and I didn't wear a seatbelt until high school. Now we know not to do these things, but at the time we didn't know any better. I believe that once we know better, we have a responsibility to do better. I'm a statistician, and I do research on adolescent depression and anxiety, and it's linked to later substance use. So when I hear of the strong research that shows later start times can help improve kids' mental health, I feel compelled to come and speak to you. You have a choice. You can choose the safe option, no change, no risk that parents, coaches, and teachers will have to adapt and might complain. Or you can take a step towards actually making our kids safer. You can move start times later, and that will increase the amount of time our kids will sleep. Increased sleep will improve their mental health, reduce traffic accidents, reduce sports injuries, and improve healing from concussions. I say this not because I feel it is true or based on my personal anecdotal experience, but because of an overwhelming number of studies with many participants and subjects where they have found these outcomes. Studies show that teens really do get more sleep when school starts later. They don't just stay up later. And this has many positive health benefits. Yes, the change will require creative thinking and a lot of logistical changes, but you already have a roadmap of how to do it, based on the 1 year of great work by the Rethinking School Start Times Committee and what has worked for other towns that have already made the change. These details can be worked out. Wilton has made this change 15 years ago, and they're still very happy with it. Wilton strongly values sports and had a very successful transition to later start times. In fact, their sports teams had one of their best seasons after the change. They won several state championships. You cannot make everyone happy with your choice. I do not envy you. So why not do what is right for public health? Wouldn't you like to remember your time on the board as a time when you did something that was hard, but in the best interest of our kids? Please choose science and health of our kids before the convenience of adult schedules. Knowing you did the right thing for our kids should help you to sleep better at night, and it should help our kids sleep better too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Suzanne Tenser Zaletsky? Did I say that right?
Hi, good evening. My name is Suzanne Tenser. I live at 56 Pheasant Chase here in West Hartford. I'm a local pediatrician here in West Hartford and also a parent of an elementary student and a middle schooler. I moved to West Hartford for the superior public education our town provides. While not a perfect proposal, I am in support of changing the school start times. There seems to be a lot of misleading information circulating, so I'd like to focus on data, not opinion. As many of you are aware, in 2014, the American Academy of Pediatrics, or AAP, published the policy statement, School Start Times for Adolescents. The key messages: chronic sleep loss in children and adolescents is one of the most common and easily fixable public health issues in the U.S. today. Studies show that adolescents who do not get enough sleep often suffer physical and mental health problems, an increase of automobile accidents, and a decline in academic performance, which I see in my patients. At the start of puberty, adolescents' biologic sleep cycle shifts as much as 2 hours later. It makes it difficult for most adolescents to fall asleep before 11 p.m. At the same time, their sleep needs do not decline, which is 8.5 to 9.5 hours required per night. To give teens an opportunity to receive the recommended hours of sleep each night, the AAP recommends middle and high schools delay the start of school until 8:30 a.m. Sleep issues are complex, and we need to educate teens about healthy sleep habits. But the evidence strongly suggests that too early start of the school day is a critical contributor to chronic sleep deprivation among American adolescents. The CDC and U.S. Department of Education researchers reviewed data of nearly 40,000 public, middle, high, and combined schools to determine school start times. Schools that have a start time of 8:30 a.m. or later allow adolescent students the opportunity to get the recommended amount of sleep on school nights. Insufficient sleep is common among high school students and is associated with several health risks, such as obesity, alcoholism, drug use, car accidents, depression, as well as poor academic performance. As a wife of sports is a big issue that I know is going around. As a wife of a coach and as a parent and a pediatrician of children who compete in athletics, I am a strong supporter of participation. There is a concern among how the later start times will affect athletics. There are many avenues to make it work in terms of timing. I'll go back to the data. In 2012, Dr. Matthew Maliski reported that teens experience 68% more sports injuries when they obtain less than 8 hours of sleep. Sleep deprivation is known to impair hand-eye coordination and peripheral vision. Furthermore, here are some quotes from coaches whose schools underwent the change. Director Athletics at St. George School in Newport had 48 teams in 22 sports. We found switching to 8:30 start one of the best things our school has ever done. The impact on athletics is minimal. Wilton, Connecticut schools changed times in 2003. Wilton is self-described sports town. All sports organizations were tough opponents to change, insisting that a later start and end time lead to expulsion. And that didn't happen. It was quite the opposite, I see. Towns in Connecticut and around the country are seeing the positive impact of the change on academic, sports, mental, and physical health. The data is there, and we can and should do the same. I thank you for all that are involved in planning this. Thank you.
Thank you. Abaya Clark.
Hi, I'm Abaya Rule. We're at 28 Buckingham Lane, and I've been on this committee for about 2 years, so I appreciate you guys listening to us for almost 2 years now as we come in and try to explain to you why we feel so passionate that this should be moved. When I first started, I didn't realize that it was going to be such a divisive issue, and I know that now you guys all see that it is a very divided town that we live in. But in the end, I think, everybody wants what's best for our kids. And when people talk about the middle school kids, we just had some middle school kids come now and how they're going to be affected. Well, in my opinion, they might have a tough 8th grade year, but in 6th and 7th grade, I feel like we, as parents, we still kind of have a handle on bedtime, whereas by 11th and 12th grade, that ship has sailed. We have no handle on bedtime. And so we just have to try our best now to help out our high schoolers. And the stakes are just so much higher in high school. There's all the AP and honor classes that get you into college, all the college entrance exams. Most of the high schoolers I know don't even take a lunch, and so they're having lack of sleep, not enough nutrition, and then they have to go learn how to drive, and we are on the road with them as they're learning to drive without adequate rest and without having lunch maybe, and then they have to do sports and homework, but homework's another issue. Maybe you'll start another less homework committee down the line, but right now we're just doing the school starts later. And I know it's tough. It's a tough decision. Half the town's going to be happy, half the town's going to be unhappy. But in the end, I do hope you just think about what's best for the kids and maybe not what's best for the sports or after-school activities, but the actual kids that, are going to inherit this earth. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you both. Nora McHugh.
Good evening. My name is Nora McHugh, 53 Belanger Avenue. I come to speak with multiple perspectives on this issue. I'm a lifelong West Hartford resident. I'm a graduate of Hall High School, and I am in my 8th year of teaching science at Hall High School. And I teach anatomy and physiology, so I know the science, and we've had people speak to it, so I'm going to skip over the science, and I'm going to talk to you about 11th graders at 7:30 in the morning. Okay, everyone, ready? Sit there quietly. Good morning. Welcome to my life every morning. They literally cannot muster the energy to greet me at 7:30 in the morning. They are so tired, they can't find their pencils, and these are students who are high achievers in everything that they do. 7:30 in the morning is painful. It is unnatural. It is not right for these high school students. My first period students underperform their peers year after year after year. I'm the same teacher at 7:30 in the morning as I am at 1:30 in the afternoon. They might not appreciate me anymore, but I am the same teacher. And the point is, they are not prepared because they are exhausted. They're not supposed to be awake at 7:30 in the morning. And as a graduate of Hall High School, I remember waking up, and I believe start time last century when I was there was 7:40 a.m. Can anyone confirm that? I believe it was 10 minutes later. And I remember how awful it was waking up in the morning. And I'm presently the sleep-deprived mother of a 7-month-old child, and I feel more rested now than I did as a high school student, and that is saying a lot. So I implore you to look at the data that our other members of the community have shared and recognize that this is so true. I see it. I live it. These students are not doing their best in the morning. We are not doing our best for them. And I understand it's inconvenient on many fronts. However, this is not about us. It is about them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dahlia Pendergast.
Hello, my name is Dahlia Pendergrass, and my address is 423 Mountain Road. I am an immigrant to the country and to West Hartford, so I am deeply, deeply grateful for the opportunity both to vote today, or yesterday, I should say, and no, I didn't vote today, and to be a part of the process that shapes our children's days and future. I am also a mother of a 10-year-old and 12-year-old and a psychiatrist. I'm a physician mom who is very well versed in the normal physiological changes that happen as children enter their teen, as their biological rhythms are delayed, and the consequences, the real consequences on energy, concentration, and well-being. I'm especially delighted by hearing my daughter's classmates in 7th grade contemplate such things as mental health and anxiety and even self-harm as very real consequences of decisions that grown-ups make on their behalf, and decide to do something about it. If only it were as simple as changing school times to address all of those issues. So all of that said, and again, the data is real, it is solid, I have no questions about it. I fear, however, that in our haste towards implementation, many unintended, also very real negative consequences have not been fully addressed. They are not related to my schedule or daycare, or whether or not there's somebody at home to watch the kids or get them to school in the morning. They are related to the shape of their lives, the interests that they have, the activities that they do, and to the consequences that may be unintended. It really is like trying to bake bread in an hour and not giving it the time to rise. It's been a year, 13 for some, I hear, a year of hard work. I wonder if I think we need a little bit more. One example that I'm most familiar with, that's most relevant to my family, is the MathQuest children in middle school, or the advanced math children in middle school who now get bused to the high school in the 1st grade and they miss their advisory period, right? Or it's called advisory. Thank you, Chloe, just to keep me informed. They'll be, I hear, going at the end of the day, although we've heard back from the board that there may be, or that there are thoughts or plans or hopes that the classes will be moved to the middle school. As matters stand, I'll have a 13-year-old, smart, naive girl riding the bus every single day in the afternoon with high schoolers who are unfamiliar, and she will be missing all of the after-school activities that are available to her at the middle school, such as after-school activities, sports, meetings with teachers, and the opportunity to socialize on the bus. I don't think this would be a reasonable price to pay for our special needs children, for example. I think it's a deterrent to academic achievement, almost a penalty. And I cannot imagine having this conversation, let's say, about my other child who has a physical disability, if the child had to miss all of these extra things just to make the school accessible for him. I believe it's a little bit of the same situation, and I see I have a red card. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, Alyssa Donnelly, please.
Hello, my name's Alyssa Donnelly. I live at 17 Pine Road. I would like to share my opinion about the proposed change in start time in West Hartford schools. My husband, Stephen Goldschmidt, and I have 3 children, ages 13, 10, and 7, so next year we will have a child at Hall, KP, and Morley. I am also a physician. I'm not a pediatrician. However, I have studied pediatric development and have some familiarity with that. And overall, I do not disagree that starting high school later is a bad idea. I think it's a good idea for the kids. However, I feel like because of various compromises that are having to be made with the proposal, some of the original ideas have been lost, such as having elementary school kids start first, then middle, then high school. I am concerned because this proposal actually goes against the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation for middle schoolers. If you read the recommendations, it states that it applies to middle schoolers and high schoolers. I'm a mother. My son is in 8th grade. He currently goes to Hall for first period. He's in the advanced math as well. And it's a struggle for him at age 13 to get there in time. So I empathize with the fact that it's hard for high schoolers. My high school started at 7:05 in the morning in New Jersey, where I grew up. And I remember it being very, very hard. I just would like to implore you to try to find a solution that doesn't possibly punish the middle schoolers, who are also going through a very important time in their development. They're going through puberty. There's a lot of social changes, academic changes, increases in their school workload and stress. Of course, it's not the same as high school, but you have 3 grades that are going to be subjected to the earlier times. And my other concern is last week, as an anesthesiologist, I'm at work at 7 a.m. every day. So I drive to work very early. And as I'm driving to work, slightly before 7, it is pitch black out. And I know I have friends whose kids went to Whiting Lane. They walked to Bristow down Farmington Avenue. I'm picturing 11-year-old kids possibly having to walk or bike to the middle schools at 7 in the morning. And I don't think that's necessarily a safe situation, even if they're walking to their bus stop. So I feel like this is not only an imperfect proposal, it's so imperfect that we should rework it and try to also accommodate the middle schoolers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, if there turn out to be other public comments, you have another opportunity at the end of the meeting. But thanks. Okay, there's no unfinished business to take up, so now we're moving to new business. We said last time that we were considering a change in the start times for us at the Board of Education to earlier, that's right, because we were grown-ups. The proposal was to consider moving the start time of the Board of Education meetings from 7 p.m., when it of course currently is, to 6:30. And so we said we would talk about it and vote today. So can I have a motion that the Board of Education approve the start time change of the Board of Education meetings from 7 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., beginning with the meeting on January 15th, 2019?
Motion.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Having been made and seconded, discussion. I will say that I believe we received one piece of mail on this subject. That piece of mail urged us to keep it at 7 o'clock because she was concerned about about dinner time, but that's all the input that we had. So arguments for 6:30, arguments for keeping it at 7.
I didn't have an argument until I did see that one email come in and with the kids. You know, our student participation, they get here early. I was actually here at 6:30 myself. And they were gathering in already early, and I'm sure that dinner times were probably adjusted for it and such. So, I mean, I really don't have a sword to fall on in this one. I have no skin in the game, if you will. I am fine with 7 p.m. I'm fine with 6:30. You know, maybe with the school participation, 7 o'clock gives the families more time to come. And then if you happen to be a student body representative and you're at sports, which we have one that's not here today, you know, 6:30 might even be difficult at that point. I know that if we had a football player, because I have practice right now for my guys, my 8th graders, on Conard Field, and it starts at 6:30. so they know football gets done at 6:30. So just some arguments and something to think about.
Anything else? Carol?
I think when we brought this up before, I said that I can go either way, either 6:30 or 7. However, since I have a prior ongoing obligation, which is employment, I would prefer for 7, because as we go further into the year and we get inclement weather, I may be delayed, whether it's snow or heavy rain, thunderstorms, or what have you. And I really don't want to walk into the board meeting late if we start at 6:30, and that could easily happen. So my preference is to keep it at 7.
I know when we had our parent-teacher council meeting, we brought this up. Just at the very end of the meeting, I sent out a reminder email that went out to all the representatives to run this past their PTOs, and I know it was in at least one school newsletter. I'm behind in reading my school newsletters, but we just haven't had any feedback on this except for that one. Informally, I've asked a few people that I happen to see in the hallway here and there, and really it didn't affect them one way or the other.
Before we move on, do the students have any thoughts on this?
It wouldn't really affect me at all. I mean, I do 3 seasons of sports, but I mean, I don't think I think 6:30 would still leave me plenty of time to get here on time.
I do think keeping it 7 would be better, because sometimes there's away games and stuff like that. I don't think it would cause that much harm to move it earlier, but I think that keeping it might be better.
Oh. I have to say, personally, like Mark, I have no vested interest either way, but if we're going to move it, it sounds like we ought to have a positive reason to move it, since we have it at 7 and people seem to be completely content with that. So is there anybody that wants to make a positive reason, a positive argument to change?
Okay, I wasn't going to talk on this because we already have enough on the agenda, but I was one of the people in favor of this, silent minority, I guess. And my reasoning was our meetings go long, in my opinion, as it is. And thinking of staff being here from, I don't know what time you guys get in, but I know it's early, that it would shorten the downtime for them. And then also for us on the board and for the general public, if we started at 6:30, assuming our meetings don't lengthen and we keep to the typical time, that we might be done by 8:30 or 9, therefore allowing us maybe to get a little extra sleep. So I, a little pun intended there, folks. So, you know, that was my reasoning behind it, is that I did think that, you know, we do have, in my year experience, as limited as it is on this board, have had more than a few meetings that go past the 10 o'clock hour. And I'm just trying to be sympathetic to all parties involved, that it is diminishing returns at that point of the evening. So that was my thought of trying to move it up. I actually would say, you know, our meetings are on average only twice a month, right? It shouldn't be that big a sacrifice to move it to 6:30. I don't see the big deal in it, but if the majority of the group wants to keep it at 7, so be it.
Tom, I don't want to ask you to speak for all teachers and administrators, but do you guys have a strong feeling either way, as far as you know?
Well, we're paid to be here. I appreciate Rob's point. Certainly, you know, the earlier I get home, I guess my family appreciates that. But our schedule, we make our schedule based on the meeting, so it's up to you. But thanks for thinking of us. I do appreciate that.
I will just say I too will go with the majority, but personally, 7 o'clock allows me to walk in versus running in trying to catch my breath.
Any other thoughts? Okay, in the spirit of moving the meeting forward, all in favor of moving the start times of the Board of Education meeting from 7 to 6:30, beginning with January 15th, 2019. Please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, despite the fact that you said aye instead of nay, I take that as a nay. With no prejudice in case there becomes reason later, it sounds like we will stick with the 7 o'clock time for the time being. Thank you all. Next piece of new business, ratification of Local 818-051 AFSCME Council 4, the Cafeteria Manager's Contract. Can I have a recommendation that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated contract between Local 818 AFSCME Council 4, Cafeteria Managers, and the Board of Education for the period July 1st, 2018 through July 30th, 2022?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Oh.
Want us to do a little presentation?
Oh, I didn't realize we'd get a whole presentation. Please.
Just a summary of the agreement. So before you is the ratified agreement between the Board of Education and our cafeteria managers, which is a large group of 6 individuals, small group of 6 individuals who have an important job of managing the day-to-day operations of our cafeterias in each of our 16 schools. So before you for approval is a 4-year contract that calls for wage increases in each of those 4 years of 2%. And the first year would be retroactive to July 1st of 2018. So it goes back a couple of months. And they'll get a 2% increase retroactive to that date. And then, as I said, a 2% increase in each of the next 3 years. The cafeteria managers agreed to some significant healthcare reform and pension reform with this agreement. So in the healthcare changes, they did agree to participate in the high deductible health plan on a mandatory basis. And that will call for a $2,000 individual deductible and a $4,000 family deductible. The board will fund 62.5% of that deductible in the first year, and then that contribution will reduce to 50% in each of the next years of the contract. The premium cost share will increase pretty significantly over the course of these 4 years. It will increase from 16.5% of the cost of the insurance up to 20% of the cost of the insurance over those 4 years. And then from a pension perspective, right now they're contributing 4.25% on a pre-tax basis into the pension plan, and that increase will rise to 7% over the course of the next 4 years. So a pretty substantial increase in their contribution into the pension plan over the course of this contract. So that summarizes all of the changes that the cafeteria managers agreed to. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that the board had, if any.
I actually have a question if nobody else does, which is there is some conversation about the state insurance, health insurance thing. If West Hartford did decide to do that, what would happen to this contract?
Yep, so that is a conversation that we're having with another bargaining unit and negotiations with them. So if that were something that we were to agree to, if the board were to agree to that, that would be something that we'd want to talk to all of our bargaining units about.
So that could reopen this conversation. They might have the option to switch if, in fact, it's better, or not switch if they didn't like it.
But that would be a decision that the board would be involved with. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's, I guess, the segue question for that. Chip, so currently, obviously, we're self-funded, so it's it is what it is. But now, these are only 4 employees, right?
There's 6.
6.
Yeah.
6 employees. I looked at council 4, sorry.
Yeah.
6 employees, and we talked about how if we went into the state plan that, you know, every number. So are these particular people included in what the numbers that we look at for the teacher contract negotiations?
So we have looked at it both ways. So we've looked at it just for that bargaining unit only, and then we've looked at it including everybody else as well.
I do want to say, I'm not sure we can have this conversation.
Probably not.
This is about, you can't bring up teacher negotiations during the
No,
ratification.
absolutely.
Okay.
No, but even, I understand your question, but there's ground rules that say we won't. So even talking about if we're talking about a part of it, so I don't think we can do that.
So I guess my next question then would be, why 4 years and not 3? Is it What, maybe I missed something. Because normally the contracts that we typically see in.
So the general contract that will, and it's a good point, Mark, that usually we do agree with administrators and teachers is a 3-year contract. With our other bargaining units, we've been maintaining 4-year agreements. This is a very favorable contract for management, for the taxpayers of the community. It's a below average wage settlement, and as I said, significant changes in the healthcare, particularly along the lines of the increases in the contribution towards the premiums and towards the cost of the pension plan. So therefore, we agreed to that extra year for this contract.
Again, I apologize if I raised something inappropriately. Any other questions?
Quick question. I noticed that the wage increase and the health insurance components are the same for the next contract we're going to be looking at. Can you remind me if this is also the same as the most recent contract that we voted on? I don't remember if it was the last meeting or maybe the one before that, actually.
So it's a little, the insurance is the same, the health insurance is the same, the wages are probably a little bit lower than that agreement, and the pension, the contributions into the pension plan and the healthcare plan are a little bit higher on this agreement than that agreement.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Ready to vote? Okay.
Do you have a question, Mark?
Oh,
okay.
Okay. Okay. All in favor of the Board of Education ratifying the negotiated agreement between Local 818 AFSCME Council 4 cafeteria managers and the Board of Ed for the period July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2022, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. That's passed. But before you get up,
We have another one.
we have another one. Can I have a motion that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between Local 818 AFSCME Council for Custodian 3s and the Board of Education for the period July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2022?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, so this group, the last group, we had 6 individuals in that bargaining unit. This one we have 4. So a little bit smaller of a group. So our custodian 3s are responsible for the day-to-day operations of our largest facilities. It's our 2 high schools and our 2 middle schools, King Philip and Sedgwick. And as you know, particularly at the high school level, those are 365-day-a-year operations. And when you throw athletics into the equation, they're responsible for maintaining all of our athletic fields as well. So these are very important jobs within the district. And to Deb's point, the wage proposal, the health insurance proposal, and the pension proposal are identical to the agreement that you just ratified for our custodial, our cafeteria managers, excuse me. So it's a 2% wage increase in each of the years, retroactive to July 1st of 2018, carrying forward through 21-22. Everybody will participate in the high deductible health plan under the same arrangements that I just discussed with the cafeteria managers. With the same increase in the premium cost share over those 4 years, going from 16.5% to 20%, and then a pension increase of from 4.25% up to 7% on a pre-tax basis. Another change we did have for our custodian 3s was a change in the retiree health contribution, and that would be for new hires. Those new hires will contribute 75% of the cost of the health insurance as long as they're covered under our health insurance plan. So that's a significant increase. And then we had some housekeeping items that we wanted to address with this contract. One was over seniority. We increased the probationary period from 60 days up to 6 months. Under safety and health, we added some language about proper uniform and footwear, and the fact that shorts wouldn't be allowed at work. These were not issues with our group right now, but we felt it was housekeeping issues and kind of good to have in the contract. Under vacations, employees are allowed to carry up to 5 vacation days over from year to year. We did allow a change that would allow them to be reimbursed for up to those 5 days if they so chose, instead of carrying them over. And then we added some new language under the workers' compensation clause of the contract. So right now, if an employee is out on workers' compensation, they are allowed to use sick pay to make up the difference between the workers' compensation payments and their full pay. And what we did is we put a cap on the length of time that they could do that. So they could do that up to 1 year, but not to exceed that time period. So those were some housekeeping issues that we added to this contract that differentiated it from the cafeteria manager's contract, but all of the insurance and wages are identical. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that the board had with this contract.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, ready to vote? Okay, all in favor that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between Local 818 AFSCME Council 4 Custodian 3s and the Board of Education for the period July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2022, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Once again, the ayes have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks for letting us know. Okay, great. So staff communications and reports, beginning with our beloved superintendent's report.
Okay, today is one of the, not just a beautiful day, but one of the great days in West Hartford, a tradition of the Red Wagon Food Walk from Morley to Town Hall. And I believe it was a record year in the amount of food donated. And November is Giving Month, and this example by the K through second graders at Morley as they walk to town. It's a visible representation of giving for the whole town to see, and then unloading and discussing what this means to so many people in town and our food bank and those that are in need. So I want to thank those kids from Morley and the example that they set for the whole community. Also in giving back to the community, Charter Oak International Academy with the West Hartford Police Department is hosting a car seat clinic this month. Removing car seats. Obviously this is something that we want to do right. The date is on the website, and notifications are going out to all of our schools with that information. So thanks to Juan for putting that together. And then with yesterday's election, I know a lot of people, what do our teachers do? Professional development across the district. Really one of those days where we can get people together for a long period of time and talk across disciplines, talk vertically, and really have time to think about our craft. So a very successful day to our teachers. I'd like to thank Paul Vicenius and his staff for putting together all of that professional development. As you saw, there were programs basically for everything under the sun for our almost 900 teachers. Speaking of Election Day being yesterday, our own kid governor candidate from Norfolk, Ava, and we don't give last names for a reason with our kids, but if you were watching Channel 8 last night, she was profiled, as were the other 6 statewide candidates. Voting is taking place all week with kids that have registered throughout the state. So good luck to Ava as this election goes on. Ava's campaign platform is on fighting poverty. So an excellent platform. So with that, questions?
I actually, first of all, want to say that we spent an hour in the parking lot when we had our first child trying to figure out the car seat. So I, for one, appreciate the car seat clinic. I wonder, actually, if you could give a couple of examples of the teacher professional development topics, because they were really so wide-ranging that I think they should get credit for them.
Yeah, one of the things I'll highlight one, we brought in a outside expert who really has crafted our math program and the elementary level for our principals to really talk about how do we how do we teach math? How is it presented nowadays? In addition to that, a kind of look about how do we organize ourselves around math? How is this? Is it top down? How do we share it with the community? So that's one that I've had. That jumps out to me because I've had so much positive feedback about it today.
That's great. Thank you. Finally, at least for me, you have been kind enough to keep us up to date on conversations about the kinds of questions being raised about start times. But I just want to ask if you might say some of this to the public, because these questions keep coming up and I don't want to have to speak for you or let people guess. Questions about the pool, questions about athletics, questions about transportation costs, questions about whether it will still be true that schools will open 20 minutes early in case kids have to be dropped off. Those sorts of questions. I just want to clarify.
Well, there's a lot there. So
of course
it goes through. I would direct anybody to the late school start times reports, and somebody, believe it or not, I've had a few emails sent to me. Why didn't you think of this? Why didn't you think of this? And I direct them. No, all of these things. Very few of these things are surprises. We've known about challenges all along. Now that we have a set time as a proposal, this is where we begin planning implementation. And so you see that implementation is not a 2-day, 3-day, it's months, because there's things that if it were cost, we'd have to do requests for proposals. And there's questions about buses. Why can't you just do this? No matter what the question, really, the answer is money. And I don't mean that as that's what the answer should be, but we could solve almost every problem if we just said, okay, we're starting every school at 8:30. We'll do one bus run, but that would be double our transportation costs. So we'd be talking, $7-8 million. We have a large enough system that we have to do multiple bus runs. So that's the reason behind it. Now, some of the struggles with I'll start with sports, as you bring up. And the truth is, I can't answer for the town sports leagues about where their field space would be, because it's not under my jurisdiction. I think that the compromise start time does allow for more possibilities that our students wouldn't have the same number of dismissals. The fact is, there would still inevitably be some dismissals, and some sports would be more impacted by it. They're not the sports with large numbers of kids, but I certainly think golf has been brought up before. That is something that would have an impact just because of the time they'd have to be out on the course by. So you could see some shifts there. The pools and the swim teams, that is something that, Helen Urbino Turco has put together information for us that I've shared with the board and the town about when the pool's available. And if we couldn't get any more time, I don't really know, again, we haven't gone to implementation. So I just hate making any promises. I don't want to say, well, that problem, we'll just figure out, we'll solve that problem. I don't have a ready-made solution for that. Again, and buy a pool, that's a solution. But right now, the most likely solution would end up being a shortening of practice, unless the town extended the time at Cornerstone. Some of the other questions that have come up, Greater Hartford Arts Academy students, we have 23 students that are in that program now. It would be probably down to about 18 next year. I feel like we've made a commitment to those kids, and so bumping our schedule back does eliminate one of those periods. So instead of being able to go into 5 periods here, it goes into 4. I've spoken to a couple parents about that, emailed them, and I've said, we made a commitment to you and you engaged in that program in 9th grade. We'll honor that commitment. I'd need to go individually, student by student, to look at their schedule. I've done that with 3 of the students, and with one of them, one of the answers would be a summer school course, which in that case, I would feel it would be right for us to provide that summer school course as part of it. So that's a cost, not a huge cost, again, in the scope of the budget, but it is something. The question that comes up about 8th graders and busing to the high school for math. And that's not just math, it's been foreign language in the past, world language. To be honest, I've been against busing that program forever. I'd rather it be taught at the middle school. It's a question of logistics because of the third middle school sending people, and it doesn't have the same numbers. But I'm still looking. I would prefer that to be taught at the children's home school anyway, which doesn't lead to missing either before school or after school. If that can't happen, after school would be the only possibility, because you'd schedule it 8th period at the high school, which would be 2:15 to 2:55, so they'd be dismissed from the middle school. So there's two options there. I don't know which one we'd choose. It would depend on what we have for staffing and certification levels. Obviously, if we're having a teacher, we're not just pulling an English teacher to teach a math class. It would be somebody qualified to teach it. Some people have asked about sports fields, and that is, in complete candor, one of the differences between some of the systems that have implemented is they have more turf fields at their high school, and it's typically in the southern part of the state, but that's a cost that, again, whether the town wants it, whether the school wants it. When we did the lights at both schools, now we're talking about 6 years ago, that was a $500,000 partnership with Booster Club and the Board of Education as we went out to bid and got that in, and funds were raised over that 2-year period to raise that. So that's a possibility. The fact that we already have turf fields at both schools and you wouldn't be adding a track probably lessens the cost, but we're not going to add something at one school and not add it at the other. So anything you're talking about two. So 2 turf fields, you're talking 1.4 million to 2 million. I know, well, why is that such a big range? It depends on the type you get, depends on the bid you get, and it depends on drainage and cooling system that you choose to use with it. For lighting, how much of the run that's already out there minimizes the cost of what we had to pay before, but you're still, say between $400,000 and $750,000 for lights at both places, and that's something. Before school start times, people have talked about lack of field availability in this town. I've had conversations with people about this since I've been in Andy's seat. So that's something I can't make promises to people. Well, it won't have an impact on field availability because it could. I'm trying to think of what else was involved in your question. Anything else you want me to get to? Yeah.
So, Tom, for me, I think Cheryl hit on it. But right now, with students arriving to elementary and middle school, I understand that their arrival time can be 20 minutes before school begins. Well, so can you elaborate on that a little? Is there an assigned staff person? How does that work?
Yeah, and that's something that I want to clear up any misconceptions. Not that a child can arrive there and be in their classroom 20 minutes before school. That's not the case. Teachers have duties. Teachers have not every classroom has a teacher there. So there's, at many of the buildings, typically it's about 15 minutes you start seeing people there. 20 minutes, certainly the principal's there, somebody's there, we've got security. So 20 minutes wouldn't be a problem. If every parent dropped off their child 20 minutes early, that would be a problem, because I don't know that we would have all of the staff there at that point, and that could increase what we would need from our staff. If it were just what we have now moved back, I don't see it being a problem as far as that goes, but I can't promise that. Rob brought up a question. I try to answer it honestly about middle school clubs that are before school, and we just have to gauge, is there an interest in engaging in that club if you're bumping that back to an earlier time in the morning? And I don't know. Part of that could be, is that club out of engagement for the kids? Is part of it for parents to have an earlier drop-off? So that's something over the next 6 months we'd have to evaluate as we offered it. So,
Just a clarifying question. You brought up some rather large figures around extra turf fields, lighting. Those are not required in order to implement the later school start time, correct?
I should have clarified. That's just, I was just putting that just like buses. No. And I apologize, and thanks for saying that. I'm just saying that's something people are out there, well, why don't you just do this? So I was just trying to say why we don't just do that is because of cost. It goes to the same question as the buses. I'm just trying to show that's why it's not. There are solutions to everything. No, there are solutions to most things. But it's like anything else. There's still going to be issues. There's no question about that. And I'm not talking about value judgment or anything else. I'm just saying that there are things, the places that implemented it positively and are still positive about it. That doesn't mean their first year they didn't have issues. And I'm not saying we can't overcome issues. I'm just saying, yeah, there are things, honestly, we would still have to figure out.
So the cost estimate is still the $94,000 that you cited at our last meeting, and maybe a couple extra thousand.
I would say that there is, because of the numbers of buses at drop-off with athletic buses, and things aren't perfect with athletic buses now. There are times that athletic buses aren't there, so it's not like things not being perfect would be all that different. However, it does limit the number, so if we can plan, where I think we're going to be okay looking at it. The issue is anytime there's rainouts, delays, game movements. So if you look at it as $350 a run and you're talking about 30 rainouts movement. And again, it's horrible to throw out numbers because there could be none, there could be more. But so I'd say, conservatively, maybe another $10,000 you put in there. As I said, we're talking about 23 kids in summer school class. We're not talking about a significant, in the grand scheme of the budget, cost, if that were something there. So no, we're still talking about those numbers. And the $94,000, as I said before, is not a guarantee that we're going to spend that. That's the estimate of...
that's the top estimate.
That's
the top estimate.
That's probably the high end.
Thank you.
I could give you a personal anecdote on lighted fields on two sports. One is football. We have practice today, 6:30 to 8, and we have it tomorrow. And we weren't sure we're going to have it tomorrow because of playoffs. So we got rained out Tuesday. West Hartford youth football has missed 40% of their practices because of rain and lighting. So if it were to rain on a normal day, we could still practice under a lighted field. And we mentioned it today. I didn't think we were going to talk about lighting. Never came up before, per se, but it's a safety issue, and I'm coaching these kids. When you don't practice, and you got to talk about heads-up tackling and things like that, it's actually a safety issue, and we talked about it as coaches outside of Board of Ed stuff. It had nothing to do with. It had nothing to do with start times of school. It was just a lack of practice time, and it came down to turf fields and lighting. Now, same with travel soccer. Don't know. There are teams that are practicing at 8:30, 9:30 at night, and then so it pushes off. So if we get on the field, then soccer doesn't, and if soccer gets on the field, then they don't. And I don't know who else practices on my field. I have two kids that practice under the lights right now, and it's difficult. It really is difficult. And we talked about a field, maybe making Sterling Field a turf field with lights just to get it out there. And it still, again, has nothing to do with time change for schools. This actually has to do with getting kids for safe practices and being able to compete at an 8th grade level, which is pretty significant, and have a safe team out there. Football, soccer alone actually has more concussions. Girls soccer has more concussions than football. But it's an issue out there. It really is, and it has nothing to do with start times. gets into that, obviously, and it exacerbates it, but it's an issue now before start times.
Mark, I'd like to learn from you because you've got experience. I live near Sterling Field, and I know there are some portable lights that they have there. What's that?
We got shut down by this.
Oh, the town said you can't use those? Oh, well, not this neighbor.
The neighbors complained. We couldn't get. They won't allow a permit. We bought those. We had practiced under the lights for. For me, I think we practiced 2 years under the lights or 1 year under the light. Yeah, so the lights have been there. Yeah, they used to rent them, and now they can't. And we came up with all kinds of solutions, point them toward Home Depot only. So we couldn't get permits. Believe me, I was the guy, because I was the generator guy last year, and so I was on top of that. Yeah, it's not a viable option right now.
They're loud. They run on diesel typically.
Oh, I do complain about the loud diesel.
Yeah,
okay.
But they're not running at 1 o'clock in the morning, though.
Thanks for the clarification.
So maybe that's a topic for a future conversation too. Is that?
Well,
right.
no, I mean, that's the question. Is it? Yeah, I mean, there's not a place that it's. The only reason I brought it up, and I apologize if it's a digression, is because I've had so many people say, well, why don't you just do this? So I just wanted to.
See, here's the thing, is that it's an issue now, and we talk about it. So it's going to be a bigger issue in field time. So it's real. It's, there's a byproduct. There's a push, and everything gets pushed back. So, it comes down to, outside of time, outside of changing the school times, the sports, at least I could talk West Hartford football and soccer, need lighted fields to practice, and we just don't have the time to do it.
Actually, I had no idea about any of that. And thank you. I didn't mean to push you into any commitments. I just wanted, because so many people asked questions, I just wanted to make sure that we all had whatever information you had and whatever open-ended challenges that we still face. I would like all of that out there.
And that's the one thing, and I'm glad you said that, and I appreciate the question. I hope I covered it without, I'm not trying to evade, I'm not trying to duck. We've said from the beginning, there are things that are challenges. There will be more dismissals inherently. Winter, there won't be. I mean, winter sports we control gym time. I mean, it's a different entity. The challenge in fall and spring is really all those things that we don't control. Things that we control, I think we're going to be overall okay with, but I can't control other schools and their schedules. That doesn't make it, I'm not saying this is insurmountable. I'm not taking a position. I'm just saying there will be challenges.
Thank you. That was, I know, rather longer of a superintendent report than you intended, but are there more questions?
Okay.
Please.
Maybe just a comment. I just wanted to respond to Deb's question to you about the $94,000 for transportation. It is inherently, as we had a little email discussion about this, a best guess. So I don't feel totally comfortable the board taking the position that that's the highest cost. I don't think I like using those words because obviously, as you just said, we just don't know. And that's also not keeping in mind the only cost of this change. Because as you brought up, there are other things regarding the swimming and the golf and there are other things that we haven't really discussed that could be potential costs financially. But I also think it's a concern. Specifically, the program I had asked Tom about was my son at KP goes to this program called Play. If you're not aware of it, honestly, forgive me. It's an acronym, PLAE. But basically, they play before school.
6:30 in the morning.
It's 6:40.
I think it's people learning and exercising.
Thanks, Deb.
I don't know. Something like that.
But my son has dodgeballs thrown at his head at 6:40 in the morning, basically. But he loves it. And so they start at 6:40. It goes to 7:40. And this is one of those, it's not a financial burden, but my question was, well, if we push the middle school start time back 20 minutes, does that mean then we're going to put that at 6:20 to 7:20? Are we going to be able to get school personnel there? Because now school personnel is going to be there before 6:20. Is our community going to want to show up at 6:20? You know, he told me, I asked him, like, there were over 50 kids in the program. I mean, that's a sizable, I think, family community that's doing that program. So that could be, basically my point is that could be a casualty, because if we can't do it, it's either going to be shortened, kids won't be happy, or if they try to move it after school, it conflicts with all the different after-school programs. As one of the speakers spoke, there are alternatives that could solve problems, as Tom's alluding to. It doesn't mean they are, in my opinion, good alternatives, because obviously when the kids have after-school commitments to do other things, whether it be a sport-related activity like cross-country or football, it's not just a sports argument. There are other things like unified theater, and there are music instruction that kids would then have to choose. So kids would then suffer. And I firmly believe that academics is what this district is all about. But a phrase I like to use a lot in life is it's not an either-or proposition. By nature, what I do for work is compromise. And I know that what we tried to do is come up with a compromise decision, Cheryl, and I respect that. But it feels like a bad one when we know all about the science and how the middle school kids are just going to suffer. And to say, well, those kids are eventually going to be in high school, I think pays short shrift to the 3 years that they are in middle school. And so I feel like there's a larger financial footprint, I think, that we might be overlooking. It's not just $94,000. And there are a lot of non-financial impacts to the town as a whole, but also to the families, as we've received in hundreds of emails of people saying that they will be a financial burden to them, and that there will be social or mental or economical burdens to the kids, after school jobs, etc. So there are a lot of things going on here, and I just think the board has a lot to consider. It's not simply cut and dry of, well, the science says one thing and it's versus athletics. There are a lot of different reasons and things that will be impacted.
Thank you. I just want to say we're not actually discussing the school start times. I was just asking to clarify exactly what we did know exactly about these sorts of challenges. We don't know lots of answers, but we do know some, and that's why I was asking for clarification. But this is exactly the conversation that we need to think about individually, and then next time we need to have a full debate about exactly these questions. How do we balance all these issues? Mark, did you want to add something?
So I got to tell you, I think sports, in my mind, is getting a bad rap, from me at least. I'll speak for myself, as I always do, is because when I say sports, it's obviously so close and tangible for me because of my kids. But it's really, when I say that, I say SAM. You know what that means? Because I just made it up. It means sports, art, and music. All right? That's my new acronym. So when I talk about it, I've inherently always, I've kind of corrected myself through the discussions, but it really is sports, art, and music. It's not, because they're all after school programs. So I just want to make that clear too. And just on a segue with you is and I've brought this up several times too, because my kids, I have to get them there at 6:33. My kids are crazy when it comes to times, or they're late because they have to be ready at 6:40 to start play. And I've been doing this since they all entered middle school. And the science behind it, the irrefutable, is that the kids get going, and we've talked about this, and I've talked about it publicly, is that it's there's that portion. The kids get up earlier and exercise, and they're more ready for the day. And that program that is at middle school, well, as a dad, I would almost like to see it go away. No, I'm kidding. But, it's the only time I wear my slippers and drive. I never do that any other time. But, no, it's a great program. The kids love it. They're absolutely, and that might affect, that program in itself might go away. And I would hate to see that.
Fair enough. I mean, no. I think that's part of the conversation. Absolutely. Other questions with which to bombard poor Tom?
Just a quick question. When is the kid governor election?
Oh, that takes place over this week. There's 5 days. So I think the there's 5 days left when I looked at it. I think it was Monday through Friday this week, or it's Tuesday through next Monday, one or the other.
And then we'll have
So the announcement will be next week, yes. And there actually is a desk for the kid governor at the old State House, and yeah, it's very cool.
Please keep us posted.
Absolutely. More? Go
I had one more question, actually. It just came to my mind. Sorry, not to belabor this, because I know it's an ongoing thing. But has there been any outreach or discussion? Obviously, there are a few different special needs schools in town. Was there any discussion or reach out to them, like the Gengris Center, for one, as far as there's a certain population of kids that go there that are our kids, and they participate in Unified Theater? So just as one example, they participate in a lot of activities, actually, but that's one that jumps to my mind. And with this potential shift, for example, the population, if the school times that they get out, which I happen to know conflict with this change, where after, for example, with the middle school Unified Theater programs, when they meet after school, has there been any thought about how we would help those kids? Because if they're now going to be getting out of school later than the middle schools in our town, it's going to be a burden on them, therefore, to have to leave school every time that they're supposed to get to that program to participate. And that's just Unified Theater. I don't know if that would impact Unified Sports, whatnot.
No, I think that's certainly a fair question. To be honest with you, we start Unified Theater at different times at the different middle schools. The high school program, it had no impact on, and I focused on the high schools when we talked about that. I can get that information for you. I'll talk to Gretchen and and Gretchen and Ann and talk about the timing of it. I don't know, to be honest with you, because it's not a universal start time like it's a later start time at the high school side. I only focused on the high school, so fair question. I'll get that for you, hopefully soon.
Great. Any other questions you want to make Tom go find out? Because I think that's a really important one that you raised.
Tom, if the play program at the middle school, because moving the times, how did it impact it?
The middle school plays?
No. The
Unified
early
Theater?
morning play, where it's PLA.
Oh yeah, that's
the acronym.
It would depend on the interest level. I mean,
no, the interest level is tremendous. Actually,
Yeah.
it's many.
No, I know. So if we shifted, the question would be
whether it even
is
that
there
it
an
exists.
interest level if you're starting at 20 minutes earlier, or would you?
Or does it
start
even exist, or it doesn't?
That's exactly the. Yeah.
Can you?
I don't have an answer for that until.
No. Could you ask? It's not the interest because the
won't
kids
have. I'll be honest.
It's whether
with
they're
you,
going to do the program or not.
That's something that over time, I can get better information for you. I don't know that and this is the issue with any implementation, is that we'll have months after a vote to plan it out, to see, and I know you'd want that information before you vote, and that's fair. I won't be able to get that information across from all the schools, the timing, because the big reason is I won't get the information from the parents. Would there be an interest level in starting at 20 minutes earlier until we had signups? We'd offer it still. I'm confident in that. But again, the idea of what would the interest level be like, that would be something that would have to come out through trying it.
I'm not really concerned about. It's a matter of fact, if you're going to get a teacher there, open up the doors, that piece.
Yeah, I don't.
You're going to come in. Are the kids going to come in at now 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:10 instead of 6:30, 40? That's not whether there's interest, but whether there's going to be enough time. So we'll say today's at 6:40. Will there be enough time to implement the program with the same start time?
Yeah, I would say, would it be the exact same time? No. I mean, you're moving the school day up 20 minutes. You could move it up 20 minutes. You might truncate it, move it up 10 minutes, and make it 10 minutes shorter. That would be something I'd have to look at and talk to people. Like I said, I don't anticipate that everybody would say no. But again, I don't know until that comes up, and I don't know the interest level. If it starts at 6:40 now, my assumption is you'd go to probably 6:30. I don't think you'd try to start it at 6:20. That seems 6:30. Things tend to be around round numbers. So maybe you would cut 5 minutes off it at the end, make it close to the actual start time. But I'd have to talk to all the people that do it, because it's not a universal program. It's not a district program. That's a school program. So it's not offered at all 3 middle schools. So, yeah.
Any more homework for Tom?
Not homework. I just want to thank you for answering the questions, and I know different questions have been coming in as well to those here. I also just want to encourage individuals, as again we know in 2 weeks we will formally be discussing and voting. Until that point in time, those that want to get caught up on information, certainly by going to the WHPS website, and there is an icon there to click on to information that the Rethinking the School Start Time Committee has presented. Also, if those are more verbal learners, you can certainly go to the YouTube West Hartford Community Television to watch past meetings that we've had as well. I think it's very important, as people want to be abreast of the information, that the information they are receiving is accurate information and conversations and data that has actually been cited during the meetings here. So I look forward to our continued discussion in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Now we're ready to move on? Okay, you're off the hook, Tom. Thank you. We turn to staff reports and board discussions, starting with a security update from Dr. Andrew Morrow.
Eric Dempsey, our Director of Security, is coming up tonight, who doesn't get the opportunity to speak in front of you often, but I will say this while he's here to embarrass him. Of all of our hires over the past few years, Eric is as singular a home run as we have had. Eric's work in our schools, Eric's work with our teachers, the training, the presentations. He's not just an expert in West Hartford, he's an expert across the country, and we are really lucky to have somebody like him thinking about this all the time. And so with that, I'll turn this over to them for their short presentation.
No, I would absolutely second that. In honor of Mark and making up turns, we will call this Talking About Security Experience Reporting, TASER, for those of you who would like to play along at home. This is just, again, a short opportunity for us to share with you some of the work that's been done, not only over the summer, but continues to be done during the school year. And I'd like to start by thanking our close work that we do with the West Hartford Police as well as the West Hartford Fire. We rely on them every day in our schools, and it's a real partnership. Hopefully you will continue to see, when you're in our schools, a police presence. And again, this is something that we started many years back, the idea that as patrol officers are in the neighborhood of schools, that they take the time to go into schools, they introduce themselves, they walk the building, so that if they ever have to respond to an emergency, they have that visual mapping. And that's something that we encourage them to continue doing. We've recently completed over the summer, and Eric can talk a little bit more about that down the road, our all hazards plan, which is really a town-wide approach to crisis management, and includes not only safety plans for individual schools, but also safety plans for different what-ifs and different scenarios, and how the town and the resources would come to bear for that. It's something that we develop working with our school resource officers, working with police, working with fire, working with medicine, and the other groups that we do. One of the things that hopefully you've seen, and hopefully you've seen with some of your kids as well at the secondary level, is we've introduced a new app that is called Anonymous Alerts, and this is in response to Homeland Security and the United States Secret Service, which came out over the summer and talked about some different best practices that they see in student safety and security. And one of those is providing that anonymous reporting tool, a way for students, a way for parents to share concerns, whether these be concerns about behavior, whether these be concerns about safety, weapons, mental health concerns as well. And so we met with some various vendors, Eric and I, and we chose this group to pilot this year for us. And we started this on October 15th. It rolled out at the secondary schools. Parents, students can access this on our websites. They can download the app and do it through the app. It's anonymous. It also allows, however, for, if they choose, for an administrator to then text them back to get further information. Thank you for sharing this. Could you share with me perhaps where this occurred so I could see if there's video on it, that type of situation. So it allows for us to have that sense of anonymous with reporting with students, but to also be able to communicate and thank them for the information, but also to get more information if we feel it's necessary. I can share, one of the reasons we actually really wanted to go with this group was it allowed us to load in different things onto the app. And one of the things that we did load onto the app, and Dave, you're a big proponent of this in helping us to get this printed out before, is we actually have on the app, if you go onto help, into the help section, the West Hartford Cares resource card. And all of that information is now in the palm of kids' hands. And so if I'm struggling, if I'm someone who doesn't know where to turn, this can hopefully provide those resources for us. In the past, we've printed them out, we've handed them out to kids, but we felt this was an important tool as well for providing those links. We've received about a dozen reports in the 3 weeks that it's been up and running. And of those reports, about 4 of them have been mental health concerns with various students, and the system works. Within hours of getting the report in, we're able to identify the student that's having the concern, and we're able to bring resources to bear. And so it has been a very positive experience for us. Physically, some of the stuff that we've continued to do.
If I could just interrupt one thing with that, because I do want to point out the commitment to our kids goes beyond school hours. It used to be what interferes with the school was the only mental health responsibility of the schools. We've gone beyond that, but I do want to give this as a shout out to Eric and Andy, because those alerts don't just go into the ether. If it's 3 in the morning on a Saturday morning, they're both alerted and they're in contact with the police. If it's while it sounds like just 12, or 12 being a lot, this is something, I mean, their work for our kids' security is 24 hours a day, so I want to thank them publicly for that.
Thank you. One of the things that we've continued to work on, and you'll see coming up in our CIP as well in the spring, is the continued work that we've done with the video systems upgrades. The secondary lock replacement program is underway. As you know, we started with the elementary schools, and we've been working our way through the 16 buildings, and so we're finally finishing up with the middle and high schools. But again, as you know, that work is done at night, so it's a long process, but it has been a good process. We've renovated security entranceways to meet different security standards. As you know, we completed that at Hall at Sedgwick. This summer, we're going to be completing that at Conard, and putting in, again, we're going to be redoing their office and their entranceway and creating a man-trap situation there, just like Hall has. And then we're going to also be reconfiguring Bugby's entrance. And that's going to actually be a 2-year project. It involves building out from the office at Bugby, also making it ADA compliant. Because currently ADA compliance at Bugby is along the back in by the gymnasium is the ramp. So we're going to be putting a ramp in front as well. So that's a good project as well. We also have plans, and we'll be sharing with you ideas of doing that at our different schools as well. We've really taken a hard look at reconfiguring buildings to allow for that secure entrances. We feel that that's an important piece of our security. We've been adding, and again, we don't often talk about this and go into details, but we have been adding window films at different areas that we feel were vulnerable. And these are forced entry protection, as you know. These are not ballistic glass. They do not stop a bullet. However, they stop a window from shattering, and they stop penetration. The idea being, and Eric, jump in and talk a little bit more about this, but if you want, but the idea being that it stops the entry and allows for the armed response by the police, and it buys that time. What am I missing about?
No, it's a delayed system. So the idea is to delay entry into the school. So as part of our all hazards plan that we submitted to the state, which we're required to do every year, This year, we had to do a physical security assessment at each and every school. That was a joint effort with the West Hartford Police Department, our SROs, and the principals who worked hard to get this project done. So we look at what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses and vulnerabilities at every school, because each school is unique in its construction when it was built. So one of the things we've been looking at, as Andy talked about, is our entranceways. And it's one of those things that you see these videos on YouTube, all these great, security-related products. One of the things with the window film, for example, I wanted to see how it worked, so we met with the West Hartford Police SWAT team. We went out and we tested it and to see how it worked, and the results were very impressive, to say the least. And it's something that's relatively low cost in the grand scheme of things compared to some other options that are out there. The West Hartford SWAT had their breacher, who the guys are designing, the job is to take the doors off, and they were even amazed at some of the products. So it's something we're going to be moving forward with and looking at each school on an individual basis, as far as what the vulnerable areas are and what we could do to better protect the schools.
So again, our work, a lot of it is behind the scenes, and a lot of it is also in conjunction with our partnership with West Hartford Police, that we thank them for each and every day in our schools, and we're available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Andy and Eric, for that presentation. As I looked through the material, I had a question. It sort of was defined in here, but it wasn't clear to me in terms of the difference between the SRO and the CRO. And I like the idea about your officers that are patrolling and coming to the school, because that way students and officers are familiar with one another, especially if they see them out in the neighborhood, maybe doing something they're not supposed to do. They can pull their coattail and establish that respect. But more importantly, can you just probably define for me the CRO's role? Because that's the community resource officer versus the school resource officer, right? Or are they the same?
Officer, right? Yeah. They act as the same. SROs are officers that are actually assigned specifically to our high schools, and that is their sole station. Community resource officers may be assigned to a middle school as well as 3 elementary schools in that area, and so it's much more of every day they're not in the same location. Every day our 2 school resource officers are at the high schools, and so it's really just a label for them, for within their department.
I had another question in terms of you upgrading the video systems in the school, which is a great idea. But I also know sometimes those systems go down, especially as you're upgrading, or even if they're in place for a while. So how do you respond to that? More importantly, when a system is down, how long is that system down before a backup kicks in, if you will? Especially when we have bears roaming around our town sometimes. Well,
unfortunately, it's not a real bear identifier unit. We only have a couple of the cameras outside at our elementary schools, especially at Bugby, and we don't have one pointed to the woods, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is we review that almost every morning to go through the list. It's a very simple software, and to see which specific cameras aren't on the network and which are down. And so we work very closely with IT to reboot those different units. We've been having difficulty with some of the 360 cameras that were installed initially in the high school units, and these were cameras with an initial vendor that really are just not up to the caliber of what we're expecting from them. And so we do have a bid out right now with our new vendor that's been taking over as we've been upgrading some of our systems and software, to go ahead and to swap these out with better units that will have more reliability. But we don't have an entire school that will go down. We may have one camera here that needs to be reboot, one camera here that needs to be reboot, and we really try and focus on identifying those and getting them back up.
And as the cameras do go down, because I do get the alerts too, it's an automatic alert that triggers our IT department. I get the alert as well, so it'll tell me what school and what camera's out, and then they'll start the trouble ticket to get that back online as quickly as possible. Absolutely not.
And then just a comment, I do want to say that the schools are, you know, in terms of staff, are pretty much up on security, and I welcome that, and they do that to everybody, even sometimes when students are trying to, you know, catch that door swinging open. So I think that's pretty good. You've done a good job.
Thank you, and we continue to work with the staff. Eric has gone out with community resource officers and school resource officers and done security briefings at each of our schools. We continue to go ahead and do that, working with our staff and making sure our principals are working with our staff. Just like we drill different scenarios with our principals, our expectation is that our principals take that to their staff meetings, and will continue to do those scenarios as well.
Which I do want to say the training that Eric's doing with our staff isn't easy. I mean, there's pushback from the beginning. Why? There's pushback always. Why?
There's tears.
Because it's not easy stuff. Because people want one rule. That would make things simple. And I think you could talk quickly about talking to people about making decisions.
Yeah, it's there's not a one-size-fits-all. There's not one app or one way to handle a situation. So, Andy, I was just briefly talking about one of the things we're big proponents of is doing tabletop exercises, and we've been doing it at our leadership meetings as well, to put them in different scenarios that are difficult scenarios to talk about and to work through and to see what would be what are the initial steps that I need to do to keep everybody safe and to get through the emergency situation until help arrives. And it's a simple, easy thing to do, and in fact, we're doing one tomorrow as well with some of the assistant principals at the school. So I'm a big fan of the tabletop exercises.
I just want to say, first of all, that it is heartbreaking to know that we have to be in this kind of world. Although after I say that, I will date myself to say that we, of course, had nuclear bomb air raid drills. So it's always something, as I guess. But anyway, I agree. It's really quite impressive. But I did want to come back to the app thing to say that I feel very proud to be on the Board of Ed of a town that is this proactive. We have not had mental health crises that have gotten out of control, but you guys, I'm really happy that we have such a proactive plan in place. So thank you for that. Other questions, comments? Oh, please.
So as a follow-up, how do people find the app?
There's actually posters throughout the school that allow kids just to scan directly from the poster and download the app. If you go to either iTunes or to the Android store, you'll see it there. It's called Anonymous Alerts. You download it. There's a West Hartford code you all received. All the parents received in the secondary schools received a letter home that outlined how to load the app, or if you just go to any of the websites, there's a link on there that will take you directly to the app.
Thank you.
Hey, just want to, Eric, give you a shout out. It was about a year ago. You let me observe a lockdown at one of our schools, and I recall at that time, you showed me what you do to make sure that things are working right. And you're not trying to scare the kids. We're not trying to scare the kids. This is part of, unfortunately, what we have to do. But then as I think about it, the film you talked about, it's a security measure, but it's not obvious. It's not in your face. It's very nice. And then I also, Andy, Tom, and if Bob is here, can remember back when we were talking about Charter Oak, I was worried about the school across from me having a 6-foot-high fence. And I didn't want that 6-foot-high fence. But it's black. It's not in your face. You hardly notice it now. Appreciate those types of measures. Keep them up. Thank you for considering the children, their safety, and the overall environment as well.
Thank you so much. And now we move to the substantive part of our evening, the Smarter Balance results from Mr. Paul Vicinas.
Good evening, everyone. Give me just a moment. Cue this up. And I'm pleased to be joined as well by both Carrie Jones, our Director of Elementary Education, and Ann McKernan, no stranger, our Directory of Secondary Education. And it's a privilege tonight to be able to report on our 2018 state assessment results for grades 3 through 8, which are otherwise affectionately known in the public as SMART or Balanced. But there are state assessments for literacy and mathematics. And the one thing that I like to point out in terms of our state testing program is its purpose. And its purpose is not for individual score reporting on students. It's not a component of a report card or a measure of intelligence. The state assessment system is quite plainly a progress monitor and a program measure for us. How are we doing as a school district, and how are our schools doing in terms of our literacy program and our mathematics program? So it's in that spirit that I'll bring you through the topics that you see here in the agenda. We will talk a little bit about, because the state does provide score reports to parents, I want to make sure I do a little public service announcement, make sure I give some brief explanation as to what information is contained in those reports with the disclaimer that I just gave. And then talk more globally and more importantly about what's the performance for West Hartford, both in terms of our achievement measures and our growth measures. What does that analysis look like when we disaggregate across different student groups? What's our ongoing efforts? What's the so what of all of that? We'll discuss and then provide opportunity for questions. So I'll start out with a little graphic of these are a picture of what the score reports do look like, and the bulk of our score reports were mailed out in October, I believe in early October, for our current 4th through 8th graders, students who took tests last year in 3rd through 7th. We did have a delay in mailing the 8th grade results. They went out to our current freshmen really just this last week, so I imagine they've arrived at home by now, and that was really just due to some misprinting that had happened at the state level. They had to resend them out to all the schools. What parents will see there, the first thing they'll see, and you see it there on the top in that green aqua color and down below in the purple, is they'll see a scale score for students, and underneath each scale score is a corresponding level. So all of our state tests are on a common vertical scale that is between 2,200 points and 2,800 points in and around. And that number, quite honestly, is probably very meaningless. The real question is, okay, well, what level did I hit? Some time ago, this is our 4th year of scores in the state assessments, the state moved away from a 5-category system that we used to have under the Connecticut Mastery Test to a 4-category system. They essentially said, hey, proficiency is no longer good enough. We want to be a goal-oriented state. And so the categories of level 3 met goal corresponds to what it used to correspond to under the Connecticut Mastery Test. The goal was the more rigorous measure, and exceeding the goal, that's typically somewhere in the neighborhood of the top 25% of kids. So the older measures under CMT, to include proficiency, that kind of got absorbed into this approaching, this wider band of 2, and then did not meet. So really, students who are at that level are having some significant struggles in terms of achieving the grade level expectations. So that's the big kind of information that you'll see right there. The next piece of information are the two-year data for parents, so parents can see how their students did the previous year, assuming that they're at least in 4th grade, what level they were at, and how they did this year. So the previous year in left kind of grayed out the current year's performance on the right in color. And last but not least, there's also performance level data for content areas. So under literacy, they'll get a little bit of information about how is their student performing as a reader, as a writer, as a speaker or listener of the English language. And then in math, it'll talk about applications and skills, and it'll also talk about communication and reasoning and problem solving. So that's really the bulk of it. There's some text that goes along that you can see kind of down here in the right corner that provides a general profile of a student that scores in this range, has these kinds of strengths and these kinds of needs. And that information is all out with our parents. But in terms of how did we do as a district, we'll talk about our overall scores. And I believe I left off. That should say West Hartford 2018. That is my fault. Those are the accurate numbers for 2018. And where we had a period of 2 years of really a period of 3 years of very stable scores in English language arts, we had a very, very modest dip, a little bit more than a point and a half, somewhere between a point and a half that we went down from an average of 71.1 the last 2 years to 69.7. And we had a corresponding incremental gain, a little bit more than a point in mathematics from a previous 2-year average of 59.9% at goal to 61. So overall, the average change when you look across all grade levels and put it in aggregate, it's relatively flat. We're not so excited about that dip in literacy, quite honestly, and we'll talk about that a little more in the next slide. But we are happy with math, and math really, the 1-year change was a flat for math. We maintained the same level of performance that we did, which was a very big gain the previous year. In fact, since Tom named mathematics as an area of focus for us as a district, we've gone up more than 6.5 points in terms of our percentage of students at goal when averaged across all grade levels. So continues to be a big area of success. Not that English language arts wasn't, we were kind of starting from a higher place. So looking at the literacy results, and what you're looking at here are the vertical scale scores mapped out for each group over the course of the 4 years. And I offer the 4-year values under literacy with a disclaimer. The 2014-15 numbers are hard to look at because that was the first year they gave the test, and after that first year the state said in the interests of shortening the amount of time that students had to take standardized tests, they took away the writing sample. So those scores kind of stand out as different than the others. And in truth, what happened, although this might not be your natural assumption, when they took the writing away, scores went down because across the state, because the writing was an easier part of the test, or at least it was scored easier. So the 15-16 data really represents the better baseline for us. And again, as a district, you see there at the bottom, we averaged 69.7% of students at goal across the board, which was down 1.4%. And when you look at the trends, I talked about it in the report a little bit, we do see that we made gains in grades 5, a slight gain in grade 5, and a good gain in grade 8, but unfortunately we're offset by some dips that you see there in grades 4, 6, and 7. And I provide you some detail about that within the report. In mathematics, similar graph with the same explanation. And again, for math, we maintained our standing from last year with 61% of students at goal across the board. You can see the relative comparisons with the state. And we're about 15 percentage points above the state for both English language arts and math. Our local 2-year difference was a 1.1, and again, we have very strong performance in grades 5 and in grades 8, offset by a dip there, again in grades 6 and 7. No real concerns in grades 3 or 4, at least for mathematics. And I talk quite a bit about how we've analyzed that, and I could share some more information in terms of what were those specific things that we found in the grade levels that caused a dip or created a gain. The second measure for us to talk about now, and I want to slow down with this one because I think those earlier measures are probably somewhat familiar, but it's the student growth. And this is a new graph that shows the 2 ways that the state measures growth. And I like to talk about the first way the state measures growth, which is represented by the blue bars, and then tell you that we're never going to talk about that again. And so I'll explain why. The blue bars represent the percentage of students that met their growth target. The growth target is based off the vertical scale scores. If I go back very quickly, we see the vertical scale scores on the left. And again, they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,200 at the lowest end in grade 3, all the way up to 2,800. What I should point out is that all of these benchmarks that we see for all of our performance, both for literacy and math, we're averaging within the goal range. So what's goal range? Well, goal range in grade 3 is like a score of 2440. Okay. Goal range in grade 4 is a score of about 2480. So students, and that's at the lowest cusp of goal, just making over to the fence for goal. So students in general need to make at least 40 scale score points worth of growth to to be there. And those targets were set by the state based on the 60th percentile. All right, so I'll explain percentile quickly. If I'm in the 98th percentile, that means I'm in the highest 2%. If I'm in the 60th percentile, I'm in the highest 40%. So what do we notice across the board? How many kids make their goal target? A little bit more than 40%, because that's how it was designed. It was set as a very, very rigorous target. The state measures for numbers of kids that make the goal is slightly lower, somewhere slightly lower than 40, and the DERG average is just barely slightly higher. All right, so the blue one's kind of confusing. It's a hard measure to think about. We like to look at the green, because I can make good sense of this. If I'm supposed to make 40 points of growth and I make 40 points of growth, then I've made 100% of my growth target. If I'm supposed to make 40 points of growth and I only make 36 points, well, I made it most of the way there. I made it 90% of the way there. I made 90% of my growth target. So the green bars represent the average percent of growth target achieved. And as you can see, despite the fact that we had a slight dip in our English language arts scores, we had a slight gain in our growth, up to 63.5%. That's because you can still grow and not make it over whatever the hurdle is to be at goal, which gives us that percentage of kids at goal. In math, we've been pretty stable. If you look across, it's a slight dip from last year in terms of growth, but we've been pretty stable at 66% overall. In English language arts, we've been fairly stable, somewhere near 62%. The state average for average percentage of growth target achieved in English language arts is a little bit lower at about 60%, a little bit lower in math at about 62. The DERG average is a little bit higher at 67 and 70 respectively. So we're doing fairly decent and competitive relative to the DERG, and we're above the state as we would expect. I would tell you that a goal for us relative to growth as a district, an aggressive goal, would be about 70%. What's important before I jump to high needs to mention is kind of who are the students that don't necessarily make the growth, or who are the districts that make higher growth. The districts that make higher growth typically, and whether we're talking about the average percentage of growth target achieved or we're talking about making your growth target, are the districts that have a very low percentage, very small numbers of students that are English language learners, very small percentages of students with disabilities, and districts that are not very economically diverse. They have a very small percentage of kids in those categories. We, as you know, don't look like any other district in our DERG. Relative to that, we do have a fairly large achievement gap. So it explains kind of where I come up with that 70% being a good number, and why we're competitive yet not as high as our DERG. This is what we look like in terms of performance of the state-defined category of high needs, which represents those three groups: English learners, students with disabilities, and socioeconomically disadvantaged. And what you see on the top is the performance on the left graph, achievement, so performance in the 4 levels, red being a level 1, 2 being that approaching, 3 being goal, green being goal, and blue being advanced. So we want green and blue. We want green and blue to be really big. The top is 2014-15, right down to the 4th line down is our most recent scores. And what you can see is that our performance, both for our high needs group in English language arts and for our non-high needs group, has been fairly static. And looking at the distance between those two vertical lines, you can see the measure of our gap. So we haven't been doing, say, exceptionally well closing that gap in English language arts. Good news coming on the next slide. But good news here, at least, we have made, as you look at the growth measures for our high needs group, the graph on the right, and specifically looking at the green bars, we see that the green bars for 2017-18, really for both groups, is slightly larger. So our high needs students at least made more growth this last year than they had in the previous year, jumping up by about 3 percentage points. The non-high needs group growth 2 percentage points. So there is this modest closing of the gap that is not yet reflected in whether they hit goal or not. But there is this modest gain. Same graph here for mathematics performance, and what's great for us in this mathematics performance is kind of looking at the trend. The green and blue bars did actually get bigger. over the course of the 4 years for both groups, which is the direction that we want to see them moving. In a perfect world, we see those green bars getting bigger up above among the high needs group so that it closes the gap. And in fact, if you look very closely, you will notice, hey, the slope of that line up there is a little bit wider for that group. They did actually close the gap incrementally within mathematics. Although interestingly, now in terms of growth, you see kind of a flat performance for that high needs group. We can look at these same kind of metrics across our state-defined categories for race and ethnicity for both English language arts and for math. And because it's hard to read on this slide, but I think easier to read within your books, and if you're following along in the book at home, we're on page 15 there. What I have at the top, the first 2 bars, it's a 2-year trend for our black, Hispanic students, 2 or more races, and white. All right, so it's kind of a comparison of our students of color with the white peers, and so you can see just by the differing sizes of green and red, green and blue at goal, which is where we want, versus red or yellow. Below goal, you can see that we do have an achievement gap, and as we said for our high needs group in race and ethnicity, that gap did not close. In fact, it widened slightly. For each of those groups, black, Hispanic, 2 or more races actually close the gap a little bit. On the right-hand side, despite that shortfall, we see some higher growth values for those groups in those years. In mathematics, we do see that we do see better achievement among our black students this year versus last year, and we see stable performance across the other 3. And we do see, for black students and Hispanic students, stronger growth values as well. So these basically represent probably the good news part of the story, and more of that good news this year happens to be focused within mathematics. So that's kind of what that's the what of where we landed. The so what, I think, is the more important and more telling part of our story. What are we doing with this information? So as I shared in the report, and I named some of these grade levels that we've identified some specific issues with, we are looking at focused revision of both the written and the taught curriculum based on our analysis of grade level performance. All right. To be specific, say for instance in grade 4, one of the areas that we notice is our work with claims and evidence. And claims and evidence, it's not like we haven't been talking about claims and evidence for the last 3 years. It seems to have fallen off potentially to some small degree with all of our work in mathematics. In grade 4 in particular, that's an area we noticed that we were stronger last year than we were this year, and we suspect that that's one of the reasons, one of the areas in which that we need to work harder this coming year and in years moving forward in order to move that performance back up. In terms of our achievement gap, we do have, we are targeting specific use of Title IV funds that we qualify for tutoring and new programming to address achievement gap issues within grades 6 and 8 with some specific programs. Moving away from a model where we used a paid tutor who perhaps had a college degree but was not a certified teacher, to leveraging our certified teachers with some after-school programs and some Saturday programs, and using the Title IV monies from the federal government to pay for that. We're looking at improved progress monitoring of our student performance using revised and better aligned assessment screeners across grades K through 8. So in English language arts this year at the middle school level, we've got a brand new assessment that we give as a universal screener that benchmarks our kids' performance. It's better aligned to our state assessments than what our old one was, and it gives us instructional planning reports. So after the kids take it, teachers have ready-made information, not just is this kid at risk, yes or no, but hey, these are the particular standards that they're strong in, and these are the particular standards that they need your help with. We've had that in math for 2 years. So a different assessment called iReady, but one that we continue to implement. And we're also moving into our second year of a new assessment screener for both literacy and math at the elementary level that also provides us some of that instructional planning information. So we're excited about that. We are looking at and we work with our administrators at looking at 3-year performance trends by teacher and getting in and doing some specific professional development. Tom talked a little bit about a professional learning activity that the principals were involved in. The teachers also had specific training by some of those same experts, both in mathematics and in literacy yesterday, and bringing that to bear. Not just in general, but also through the relationship they have with their administrator in terms of their ongoing development. And the same thing that we're doing with administrators in terms of developing some very specific look-fors, making sure that our principals are owning their data and setting very transparent goals with their staff. So those are sort of high-level look at a lot of the work that's going on a daily basis. And I'd like to open it up at this time to your questions.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing. 5 years ago when I took over, one of the things that I've said repeatedly is we'll be informed by state testing and testing data. We won't be driven by it. And there's always a temptation, because one of the things we did, I wanted to listen to teachers and parents, and we did an audit of every assessment that we did at the elementary level, because it's easy to just say, okay, well, let's keep measuring and then we'll know exactly where. And we moved away from the ones that the teachers weren't really using. And so one of the things that's a credit to Carrie, Paul, and as we've used this data is we had our principals really present and tell us, when we're talking about a school level, talk about classrooms, talk about individual kids, really make the data about a human being instead of about X. And the other thing I'd say is we have to space these presentations out because it just would make one endless meeting. But I do want to remember we have 13 years with kids. Sometimes we only have a year, but we do. And one of the other things that the data says, if you smashed all the reports together, give us time. Give us time. Looking at a 4th grade snapshot, 6th grade snapshot, but then look what we showed last week, not last week, but the last presentation about where we are having success closing the achievement gap. Rather dramatic at the high school level. And that's something that feeds into the work that's being done here. So I'm always just worried about any one snapshot in isolation that we're not putting it all together. But.
Can I just ask a question that's related to that? I just wonder if you even know the answer to this. How much of the achievement gap is tied to the new arrivals gap? I don't know what to call it, but is it possible that some of that achievement gap is not actually economic or racial, but in fact new arrivals fit into certain patterns?
So, I'm glad you asked. Perfect question, and I'll give you more detail. I kind of alluded to it in the report, but grade 4 was an area within English language arts. We had 45 newcomers, so we look at the data for this report, look at the true cohort, who was here last year and what did they score, and who was here the following year, and then who wasn't. Who are my 4th graders that took this test, and I have no 3rd grade data on them, so they're new arrivals. There were 45 of them. 45 is not an unusual number. There's about 45 of them the previous year. What was different this year versus last year, which explains part of the dip and part of the achievement gap, only 40% of those new arrivals met goal on that test this year versus 60% last year. Okay, so those new arrivals this year were just a weaker group, and unfortunately, then when you said, okay, let me look at who met goal and who didn't across state-defined race ethnicity, a higher percentage of the students that didn't meet goal were students of color than in the previous year. I look at the previous year, who didn't make goal, students of color. It was actually fairly evenly distributed across both students of color and white students. This year, for whatever reason, the crop of 45 that came in and those that didn't make goal were more heavily concentrated within students of color, and there were more of them than in the past. So that serves all by itself to change the picture in terms of, okay, why is our achievement gap closing or widening? Why are these changes so incremental? Whereas I think, I was able to, with the SAT report, I believe, I was able to give you some achievement gap analysis based on a 3-year cohort of students that we had over time. And I'll be able to do that for you next year, now that we've got growth measures and target measures that I can kind of zoom in under. So a lot of our graphs that show that, they're just showing everybody that's in the, everybody that's in the pool for the whole year, as opposed to who's new, who's been here a while.
With the newcomers, because that was my question as I read the report. And I think you said somewhere in here it takes about a year, maybe a year and a half, to work with those students and get them up to speed or what have you. Can you talk a little bit, talk more about that in terms of the resources that are given to those students? And on top of that, because I do know sometimes when you're working with them, they have to be pulled out of other classes. What type of impact does that have to that student's performance overall, during that period of time, whether it's a year, year and a half, or perhaps even 2 years, because they've got to get, as they transition into this new district, they've got to get accustomed to the curriculum and the teaching and receiving the information that's being taught.
Absolutely. So to answer that question, I'm going to talk about our intervention models. And we have 2 slightly different models, so I'll ask Carrie to start and maybe Ann to finish and just talk about what that intervention model looks like, because how we're identifying them, other than the fact that they're obviously, some of our newcomers are just fine and good to go, it's through our universal screening. So you want to talk about that quickly?
So all students who enter into our schools in the fall, or if they entered even in November, we have a universal screening process, which are very short, under 20-minute type of assessments. Some are online, some are with teachers one-to-one, depending on the grade level and the appropriateness of the assessment for the student at K-5. So we have short screening assessments in literacy and mathematics. It would give us a baseline of their foundational literacy and mathematics skills, their concepts, their fluency type of skills. So that would be administered to the student. If they came in November and it wasn't the time we were doing it with their whole class, we could certainly do it with a reading specialist or a curriculum specialist in the building to get a sense. It's really critical that we have a sense of what their baseline skill is coming in, so that certainly starting off in the classroom, that's the first place. In the classroom setting, they're engaged in small group instruction at their level, whether it's in text and reading level books at their level. But no matter what their reading level is, it's really critical, as we've talked about at the high school level, that all students have access to higher level thinking and higher order thinking, and access to those standards and those expectations. So you may be reading at a certain level in 2nd grade when you enter, but your thinking skills, your access to thinking about character, about text, about claims and making statements and reasoning and having opinions is at a high level. Your reading level may be here. So we want to kind of continue that along. But to then boost your reading skill to be that at grade level, you might be engaged in intervention, say in literacy. So you'd be working with a reading interventionist, a literacy specialist or a tutor. I'm pleased to say all of our literacy tutors are certified teachers, many of whom have reading degrees themselves. And those would happen about a half hour, 3 to 5 times a week, and it typically is outside of the classroom setting, sometimes within the classroom, but typically outside of the classroom setting, and we would not interfere with a literacy block or a math block as much as we can. So that core instruction is important not to interfere with, and then we'd find another time when it works best for the teacher and the student, and there's never really a great time, but we work to find a time to have that supplemental intervention time. And we progress monitor that student all along the way to make sure that that intervention is striving to boost that literacy level along with that core classroom instruction.
So the process is very similar for a youngster coming in the middle school. We often do a records review too, because they may have grades from their sending school. and we administer similar types of assessments to gauge their needs. The middle schools have Tier 3 reading specialists who work with students. Teachers and counselors work together to identify what is the best time to work with the student. We don't want to take them out of English language arts class, but they may not have world language, or they may not have another subject. We also have Tier 2, which is similar but a less intensive model, maybe less frequently per week. In math, we are still creating a good Tier 2 model. We have a strong Tier 3 model. Students who come in several years below grade level in math have a double block of math with a certified teacher. And our goal there, and I can say this is another give us time with them comment, children are coming in at 3rd or 4th grade math to 6th grade. We have a 3-year program that hopes that goal is to have students enter high school with algebra. And that's a big gain, right? From you're coming in 6th grade and you're at 3rd grade level. And through this program last year, I was very, very pleased to work with the math supervisors. None of our West Hartford students, who we've had all along, entered less than algebra in high school last year. No one needed pre-algebra after that program. I can't say that's the goal. Last year it worked very well. Some years we do have 1 or 2 students who still need a pre-algebra course. We are working, as Paul mentioned, this year to identify if targeted support with our Title IV money would be a good way to work with our middle schoolers who are still struggling, who are Tier 2 students. Students who are not several years behind, but may enter 6th grade with late 4th grade skills or 5th grade skills. Our screeners are giving us better information on things like this. So this year we're going to pilot use a tier of Title IV money in small group after school instruction or Saturday Academy instruction for students who need to increase their foundational skill so that they are more confident in their math classroom.
Thank you. I have a follow-up or a piggyback from that as well. Recognizing with the those young people that fall in the high needs group, and I know you mentioned in terms of language, also in terms of socioeconomic status as well, and also there was comments throughout the report of academic challenges and how that may be influenced by SES. My question is, and you already referenced it in terms of interventions, but recognizing for any, I'm sure, household, when financially things are difficult, those stressors may impact academic performance. Are those issues addressed or recognized as well, in addition to the academic support, but the life stressors, are those pieces addressed with the young people or their families as well?
Certainly, in terms of the wraparound supports, I wouldn't say that those stressors are necessarily addressed right there in the classroom, obviously, but it's the school social workers, it's the student success teams that are meeting. When Carrie referenced the processes and the procedures with the screening and such, there's an entire structure at both the elementary level and the middle schools and high school level, where you have a student success team or an SST with a group of individuals that are looking at the child both academically. They're knowledgeable about the child generally in terms of behaviorally and other issues that may be ongoing, to say, okay, what is essentially at the root cause of a particular concern that's bubbled up to this team, and is this something, they talk about triangulating the data. So just because I did poorly on a test, that doesn't mean I'm going to go into a math intervention class. I might have been doing poorly because I have this other issue and I've got other measures and other conversation occurs with professionals who know me or know my family, know my situation, and they're able to ascertain better what is the need for this child. Is the need they need an intervention group? Is the need something different at home where I need work with the social worker to plug into different programs, or I need, same thing happens with behavior. We talked about this not too long ago I think we were talking about the CPS program and behavioral intervention, and we said just because a child is acting out behaviorally doesn't mean they need a behavioral program. It could be they're at a point of frustration and they're having a reading difficulty. So that structure of an SST team is the collection of individuals who come around and work with the child and work with the child's family to provide whatever the most appropriate support is and look at them really comprehensively.
And it's a struggle. We've spent a lot of time with Gretchen talking about this. With move-ins, September's a more difficult month than it used to be. We get move-ins and we don't always get accurate information on kids. And so you're kind of flying blind. They may not have received an appropriate diagnosis before. They may not have received appropriate supports before, but you're also balancing that with, well, is this just because they're new? Is this outside stressors? And sometimes it's this kid doesn't, well, it's only been 4 days. We don't know. And I say that not jokingly because it is this kind of question coming in. And sometimes we're deeply frustrated with the sending district that hasn't sent us information. Or the family may not have known the information. But it does present challenges across, so not only for the classroom teachers, but also Gretchen and her staff with our social workers, our building principals. That's why you'll see an influx of TA hiring in September, early especially when we didn't necessarily plan for it, but you have 45 fourth graders come in. We know X are going to need help, but we base it on each individual child. So it's a very good question, but it goes across the spectrum for us.
Anything else? Thank you so much. And thank you for reprinting that whole section. Okay, I don't want to be insulting and call these routine matters as if they're less important or less interesting. So I will just say we will move to the financial report. To approve the financial report, so I'd like a motion, please, that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the period ending September 30th, 2018.
So moved.
Second? Discussion?
This won't be as exciting as Dave's rendition last month because this starts a new kind of fiscal for us. So there's very little updates, but I'll go over them as I go through them. So the general fund to start off with, your direct salaries. You'll see at the top is 863,000, but as you dig down deep into it, you had 51,110 director salaries. It's a minor update of 20,000. Again, department supervisor salaries, 18,000 minor update, and then teacher salaries. We anticipated a greater turnover. We budgeted 15 retirees. We actually had 26, plus some additional savings on non-retiree turnovers and maternity leaves and such like that. So there's a variance of $494,000. And then if you go down to the secretarial, 140,000, so that's 9 secretaries retiring. The paraprofessionals, 90,000 with 8 paras that retired, and 5131 nurses, 42,000, 2 nurses retired, and then 5140 custodians, $95,000 with 9 custodians retiring, which you are looking at page 18. I gave you a little detail on that, but that equals 863,000 as you see the general fund balance. So, yes. So as we move on for benefits, actually, the benefits are too early to estimate. This is part of that $863,000 as well. I kind of skipped over that because there are no numbers. So benefits and purchase service, sorry, I skipped over that to get into the detail because it's just too early to estimate. So it'll be in the next financial report. So both benefits and purchases services, there's nothing to report, 0 numbers. So again, that numbers is the 863. But then the state fund balance, again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's just too early to review yet. They're just performer numbers. We're going to have very similar numbers this year as well. Our special funds, they're rough estimates. We'll have more detail and more follow-up as we go. Again, it's too early to review. And then if you turn the page, nutritional services starts off the year a little better than last year, and we should be able to break even at the end of the year too. But again, all these are very bland, basic startup numbers, so not the exciting brim and firestone that Dave had last month. So I apologize for the boring report.
Can I ask a question about that boring report, though?
Sure.
The nutrition services?
Yes.
Is this, we're actually doing better this year? Is this the first time that we've ever done better?
It started off a little better, just a little, yeah. That's all.
I'd like to take credit for that. My kids are buying lunches more than ever.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob. We take any advantage we can. This is great news.
So
even
actually,
if it lasts
Rob's
just
kids
a
will
month.
show up on the report next month as well.
Other questions? Okay, then if I can have a vote, please, that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the period ending September 30th, 2018. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, who could be opposed to such a report? Thank you. Thank you, Chip. Okay, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion that we approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of October 16th, 2018?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, we are cooking now. Thank you. Information and reports. Any, am I in the right place? Yes. Any board member reports or communications? No? Then we get to our favorite part of the evening, the report from student board representatives.
Hi, I'm Megan Poland. I'm filling in for Megan Striff-Cave tonight. So with quarter one coming to a close, we're super busy over at Hall. A lot of our sports teams made the state tournament, including boys soccer and girls field hockey, who continue playing this week, hence why Megan isn't here. Update on the game, Hall beat Conard 2-0, so. Speaking of rivalry, the Hall-Conard football game is next Saturday, so Hall has Spirit Week leading up to the pep rally on Friday before the game. The Madrigal shows begin Wednesday of next week and continue to the weekend. It's a really fun medieval dinner show performed by our choirs, and you can now buy tickets online through the Hall website. We'll be observing Veterans Day on Monday, so the foods classes will be preparing lunch for the veterans, and the music department will be performing a concert in their honor. Parent-teacher conferences also begin next week, which will alter the schedule for a couple days. And speaking of changing schedules, Megan asked me to report that throughout her discussions with Hall students about school start times, she's noticed a lot of misinformation being spread, so she's working to try to get the accurate information out to the student body. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. So at Conard, students continue to be very active, especially the seniors who just finished submitting a lot of their early action and early decision deadlines. Last Thursday night, parents took advantage of a panel presented by the Conard PTO entitled College Admissions and Life After Conard to help them navigate the college application process. Tomorrow night at Conard is the band Midfest Pyramid concert at 7:30 in the auditorium. And next Wednesday at 2 kicks off a run of the Black Box 10-Minute Play Festival, which can also be seen on Thursday and Friday night at 7 in the Black Box Theater. Also, earlier last month, Conard Drama performed The Crucible, and 10th grade classes are currently reading The Crucible, the book version, so they're going to have in-class discussions about like how the movie and book or how the play and book are different. This was already mentioned, but parent-teacher conferences are going to be going on next week. And also the football game was mentioned, and the night of the football game is Conard's homecoming dance, and planning is also in place for the pep rally, which is also next Friday. There's also a lot of buzz around Conard about the later school start time proposals. So 10 days ago, I emailed a survey to the student body with the options that the board is evaluating, and I got back about 500 responses, and it looks like the majority of students actually want to keep the start times the same, which I was really surprised by. If I had to guess why, I'd imagine that most students, when they really looked into how sports and after-school activities and work would be affected, I'd imagine option 2 lost a lot of support. If anyone wants to talk to me later about the poll that I sent out, just feel free to reach out. And one last note, David Dynowski, who's a senior, was named Principal's Choice Artist of the Month, so congratulations, David.
Can I ask where the Hall Connor game is this year?
It is at Hall at 1:30 on Saturday the 17th.
And I'm sorry, did you say Artist of the Month?
Yeah, Principal's Choice Artist of the Month.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you both. Well done, Megan. Well done, both of you, of course, but you know what I mean. That's right. Okay, announcement of future meeting dates for those of you who could not get enough of this. Tuesday, November 20th, right here in the Legislative Chamber at 7 p.m. 2 weeks later, we have a meeting also on Tuesday, December 4th, same time, same place, and then December 18th, again, that's a Tuesday at 7 p.m. Any request for future agenda items other than fields, lights, and homework, which have come up? No? Okay. Any comments from visitors? Was that a hand? Oh, please, come on up. And again, just state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Nancy Barnum. I live at 19 Garfield Road. I have been a resident for 15 years. I'm a wife, a mom of 3 boys, a 4th grader at Duffy, an 8th grader at Sedgwick, and an 11th grader at Conard. They are 3 thriving boys. They're students, athletes, sons, friends. They have a strong faith. They're volunteers. I am a registered nurse who chose to put my clinical leadership position in an emergency room trauma setting on hold to be a full-time mom. Regarding the science, I guess I have the 3 children that go against the science. My 16-and-a-half-year-old goes to bed 9:30, 9:45 by his choice every night and wakes up at 6:20. Our joke this last year and a half has been a little bit, how long did it take you to fall asleep last night, Devin? In response to the science, it says that they cannot fall asleep till after 11, and he jokingly says, maybe 5 minutes. He, as a freshman, had first period math class and advanced math, and he loved it and said that I wish I had math first period every year because I felt very fresh in the morning. My 13-and-a-half-year-old son at Sedgwick goes to bed at 8:30 every night, wakes up at 7 a.m., and he has to do that because he needs it for strong health to remain strong. My 9-and-a-half-year-old boy goes to bed at 7:45 and wakes up at 7:30 in the morning. Yes, they break the science mold, but I think it also goes back to a less than popular lens that I look through, and I think people have been hesitant to say, but it's a little bit about parents being parents. There also has not been research presented that shows the extreme evidence of boundaries set by parents that establish well, strong, and thriving children. My children have been raised and love authority and see the benefit of it, and that you can thrive under respecting authority. And so they see the benefits, and even when I say, yes, I know you'd like to stay up later, time to go to bed, because I'm your parent and I know what's best for you and I love you, they do it because they respect their parents. We've had a limited amount of technology in our home. My high schooler is the only one that still has a phone, and that stays out of their bedroom, and there's no social media. Changing the school start time for middle schooler, my 2 older ones will be in high school next year, so it won't affect me for 1 more year. That would be detrimental, loss of sleep to them. So I would request that the school start time, that you look at that, not be changed. My 3 boys request that it not be changed. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe there were other speakers. Oh, please.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. I've been a resident in town. My name is Liz Santoro, and I live on Garfield Road. I've been a resident in town since 1993, have 3 children, a college senior student, a high school senior student, and currently an 8th grade student, all who have gone to Duffy, Sedgwick, and the Connor District. They are very active and involved also in a lot of sporting events, extracurricular commitments. My husband works out of state and has a 3-hour round-trip commute daily and is often gone early in the mornings and home late in the evenings. Therefore, as a full-time working mother, the responsibility on myself falls on me for any sort of earlier, later transportation for my children and other carpooling to various school and activities. Having later start times, and it would be mostly affecting my younger child in high school next year, I believe would just be a disruption to too many schedules in my household, where I don't have the flexibility to change working hours to accommodate them. For the extra 40 minutes proposed, I believe it would create just more havoc, disruption, and some student mental angst for having missed some last period classes, which I do hear could be minimized, but at what cost? For my 2 oldest children, they've had in the past core classes, their last period of school, which could impact any sort of other curricular activities that they would be involved with. But my biggest concern would be they would be missing academic taught information, which would create a lot of angst for my children in missing that, which kind of negates the whole point of rested children are more well prepared. When pooling many of my daughter's senior friends who are already extremely compromised with demanding academic pressures, testing, college applications, as well as extracurricular commitments, they all believe they would just stay up later if they knew they had a little extra sleep time in the morning. So in their minds, they were not for it. They would just choose to leave it as is. Lastly, I guess as parents, I believe we just have a responsibility to teach our young children, teens, adults, the importance of living a well-balanced lifestyle, which includes proper sleep and getting enough sleep. We are trying to well prep them to going into the real world with jobs, forced in front of them. They won't have the opportunity to pick and choose the start time of their jobs. So it's our job to help foster them being well prepared, being accountable, taking away the cell phones, the social media. I do agree with the last comments there. And it works. It works in my household as well. I will conclude by saying I am concerned about the discrepancies and the potential increase in costs, which I know it sounds like we don't know. We have a lot of unanswered questions with undisclosed costs that I just, and my family, are uncertain and can't afford. So, with that said, by the amount of disruption, bus transportation, scheduling, academic rearranging, potentially missed last period classes, my family is not in favor of approving any proposed later start times for any of these choices, and I vote, as do they, to keep it as is, and I hope you can consider my family's decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a third, please.
Good evening, Board of Education members. My name is Annie Donovan, and I live at 50 Leonard Road. In June, I came to your meeting and spoke against school start change times. I addressed it from the elementary school viewpoint, busing, KidsLink, which is a before and after school care program at Duffy where I work. Go Dragons. I recently wrote a letter to the board, and thank you, Cheryl and Deb, for replying to my letter. I addressed it from a mother's viewpoint, having one kid that went through the West Hartford public school system and a senior currently at Hall. Both boys have and had not given me excessive grief on getting up. It is what they know and is expected of them as young, responsible adults. I address you now as a taxpayer. At the last BOE meeting, the dollar amount was $94,000 was mentioned. Has the dollar amount for the change, if passed, and then passed on to an already burdened tax community been decided upon? I know by listening tonight that it hasn't. If not, I strongly believe the board is not in a position to pass this agenda item until you have a fixed cost that can be given to the taxpayers in full disclosure and then readdressed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and I know we're not supposed to respond, but I just want to be clear that any letters that I answer, I'm answering on behalf of the whole board. So nobody should think that it's just from me. We are all appreciative and read every single letter that we get.
Just to be clear, too, we agreed as a board that, because there was questions, that we agreed as a board for only one answer to come out of the Board of Ed, and that came from the chairman, a non-biased response on behalf of all of us. And apparently that's not happening, and this isn't the first case. There's many cases before this. So if you don't hear from us, it's because we had an agreement that the board chair would answer on a non-biased opinion. We absolutely read them all, but I just want to make that publicly clear.
I just want to second that. There has been some pushback that I think it's just uninformed that if you don't hear from all of us, Cheryl, it was agreed upon some time ago, as Mark said, that Cheryl would respond for all of us. So I'm sure I speak for everyone. We read every single one of your emails, every single one. But it's supposed to be one reply, one basic reply without giving any sort of impression about which way the board's leaning, which obviously hasn't worked. But that was the agreement, just so you know.
Thank you. There is no executive session. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.